Big win for coal mining jobs and people who've had enough of the senseless activism today. Ben Pennings, an environmental activist, will now be forced to cease his public attacks on Adani after a Supreme Court decision to grant an injunction. The ongoing harassment campaign by Pennings has cost Adani and the Carmichael rail network millions of dollars in lost revenue, security costs and, of course, insurance fees. Senator Matt Canavan's a big supporter of Australia's resources sector, a former minister, of course, in the area, and a proud advocate for more and more jobs in regional Queensland. He joins me now. Good news here, Matt. Good news.
Yeah, great news for those that want jobs in this country. And great news for business too, because as your intro sort of alluded to, these activists, they've been going around and harassing law-abiding businesses in this country for too long. They try to interrupt people from getting to work, they blockade driveways. In some instances, they've been harassing farmers who might do deals with a gas company. There's been a terrible case in northern New South Wales where a farmer was threatened, his gates were padlocked and chained multiple times by activist groups. And this has got to stop. We've got to stand up for the rule of law in this country. If there's one thing our nation should pride itself on, is that we don't take kindly to people who are trying to break the law and stop other people from abiding by the law. And so finally, we've got a judgment here today where the courts are doing their job and upholding the law. And that gives us great hope that we can get on with creating jobs in this country, developing our nation, and putting aside these bullies who don't want to respect the results of elections.
I said before, Adani's lost millions and they've had to obviously use the courts, and that's expensive as well. Do we need legal change here, state or federal? We're seeing more and more of these imported from overseas campaigning methods, sort of vexatious environmental campaigning as well. It seems to be growing by the year. The real worry here, Matt, is that we don't lose jobs and investment somewhere else because it's just too hard to do business in this country.
Well, really what we do need to know more, Peter, about where these groups are getting their funding from. There's been a lot of talk in recent years about foreign influence in our politics, and there's no doubt that many of these groups are sourcing funding from largely American-based philanthropic funds. Often they come here to Australia because we're a soft target. We're a relatively cheap place to do politics. So you spend $1 million in the States, you're not going to get far. You do something similar here, you can make a real difference. And so that's why you've seen these Adani campaigns and that suddenly spring up with all these posters and paraphernalia. They're getting money from overseas, and that is illegal now under the law, and hopefully we'll get a lot more investigations of that. You might recall after we passed this law, the bureaucrats were investigating a former Prime Minister about accepting a speech invite from a US-based company. Well, I hope these bureaucrats have been read the Riot Act, and they should be focused on those that are directly seeking to change our political system with foreign funds.
I just want your take before we go, just quickly. What do people in your part of northern Queensland think about the Premier's actions yesterday? You're a dad of 5. I keep thinking about, our friend Mark in hospital in Brisbane, dying of a terminal illness, having to choose one of his 4 children and one only to say goodbye to. What do your people up there think?
Well, just before I do want to credit yourself, Peter, and others on Sky News, other presenters who have done a marvellous job highlighting these issues, and your advocacy has made a real difference, I think, in forcing change to some decisions and also helping people provide support through GoFundMe pages and stuff. It's made a real impact, and that's the most important thing here. But look, the overall reaction is up here is the same, I think, of all Australians. It's disgust that we've got a Queensland government doing terrible things in our name. Yesterday, the Premier was heartless, clearly, to the young girl Sarah and her want just to say goodbye to her dad. And today she's been gutless because the Premier's been gutless because she's refused to stand behind her own decisions and thrown out Dr. Jeanette Young as some kind of human shield. I'm really angry about this today, that premiers and some decision makers are seeking to put public servants in the firing line. Like, our public servants work very hard, and I think Dr. Young's doing her best in very difficult circumstances, but she's not an elected official. She should not be hung out to dry like the Premier's done this. And we always hear the Labor Party saying they respect public servants. Well, they're often the first people to put them out there in the firing line when a bit of heat comes on themselves.
Heartless and gutless. I've written that down. That might be in my column on the weekend, and I'll give you sort of credit for that. Matt Canavan, thank you for your time.
No worries. Have a good weekend, Peter.